Hi there, and welcome to another exciting edition of Planet Waves TV. My name is Eric Francis Compolino, the editor of Planet Waves and the host of Planet Waves FM, available every Sunday night at planetwaves.fm. Before I get into today's subject, which is the Mars Chiron square that's exact on May 23rd, I want to mention that we have a really exciting issue of Planet Waves FM up, which includes an extended interview with juror number 4 from the first ever case that held Monsanto accountable for its Roundup herbicide. The guy's name is Bob Howard, and he served on a jury, I believe, in August of 2018. This involved a groundskeeper by the name of Lee Johnson, who was repeatedly exposed to Roundup. And I have a mutual friend with juror number 4, Bob Howard, and he agreed to come on the program. He takes us inside the jury room, in case you're wondering what it's like inside the deliberations of a jury that gives someone $389 million for his pain and suffering, and then punitive damages against Monsanto. Okay, so this topic is actually apropos of today's astrology, because today's astrology involves Chiron, and Chiron was early recognized by astrologers who work with it in the late 1970s as an environmental harbinger of some kind. You could almost say that Chiron is the patron saint of the environment in astrology, and it's patron saint of a few other things, including standing out and being different. And also, Chiron is the process by which, when things get weird or difficult, or where there is some challenge, or where there is some injury inflicted, there's a healing process that's peculiar to Chiron, but described many other ways throughout world culture. But it's in astrology, it's peculiar to Chiron, specific to Chiron is what I mean, in that the healing process generates talent, ability, and focuses power. So this is not merely the healing of like a broken arm and then your arm is back to where it was. When there's a Chiron situation, there can seem to be real damage inflicted. There can be an extended struggle of some kind, the result of which is one of those profoundly character-building series of personal developments. And so when you are looking at Chiron in your own birth chart, or looking at Chiron in the chart of another person or of an event, consider the way that this whole process works, where things may seem to be bad on one level. There may be, a challenge, a damage inflicted, a struggle, a sickness of some kind. But then there is knowledge created. There are advances made that generally serve many people, not just one person. Another thing Chiron's famous for is being outstanding in some way. The first keyword ever given to Chiron was given by the astronomer who discovered it in 1977, a guy named Charles Kowal. Kowal discovered many asteroids and comets and things like that, and at the end of his life, his job was downloading the imagery from the Hubble Space Telescope. So he was the guy who would come into work at JPL or NASA, wherever he was working, and into his computer would come all of the really exciting photographs of deep space taken by Hubble. So he got to see all of those images first. And when Kowal discovered Chiron, there had been nothing like it ever known in the solar system. For example, it has a 50-year orbit. There's nothing else with a 50-year orbit. The orbit crosses the orbit of Saturn. Nothing had ever crossed the orbit of Saturn. It was part planet, part asteroid, and part comet. So it was a hybrid of several different things. And so he chose a mythical figure to name it after that was himself a very distinctive entity, and that being half man, half horse. And was outstanding and that was also a hybrid of different qualities. And so this is how we get the name Chiron. And these astronomers have a real knack for naming things. The better ones tend to be friendlier with astrologers and talk about the nature of their naming of their discoveries. Kowal was friends with Zane Stein, one of the first astrologers to work with Chiron, and so that in a very interesting way began to heal the rift between astronomy and astrology. And now there are a number of astronomers, and it's always the smarter astronomers. It's always the ones who are really doing actual work and not the ones who are kind of like, grunts working in the lab who think it's okay to say that astrology is a fraud. The ones who actually are on the frontier making the discovery tend to be the friendliest ones. For example, people like Kowal or Mike Brown, the discoverer of Eris, Dr. Jane Liu, the co-discoverer of the Kuiper Belt. So that's a little bit off topic. Let's take a look at our aspect today. And that is a square of Mars and Chiron. So Chiron, as you may know, is in Aries. It arrived in Aries over a 1-year period. These outer planets that move slowly, planets beyond Saturn, can take quite a while to change signs, sometimes up to 9 months or a year. So Chiron's transition into Aries, I believe, began last April and was completed in February of 2019. Because of the retrograde, it goes back into Pisces and stays for a while and then comes back. And it's not moving backwards, by the way. The world is just moving around really quickly in the middle of it all, and that creates the retrograde illusion. All right, so Mars is in early Aries, and it's a slow mover. It takes 9 years to go through Aries. Chiron. Mars is a fast mover. Mars is in Cancer. Mars takes only 2 years to go around the zodiac, which means that Mars will make 25 orbits for every 1 orbit of Chiron. And currently, Mars is making a 90-degree aspect to Chiron. That's called a square. We've got it written in right there. And it's very close to 90 degrees now. It's like, as of today, as of the time of this recording, it's just for shits and giggles. The position of Mars is at 409 Aries. And the position of Chiron, I've got that backwards. It's still early. The position of Chiron is at, way to go on air. Your astrologers are hard at work. The current position of Chiron is 5 degrees of Aries. The position of Mars is 409 Cancer. So it's just under, that's 5 even as of right now, and that's 409, formula 409 as of right now. And so that means with Mars moving faster, the square has not happened yet. It's what's called applying, because it's hasn't happened yet. That's what applying means. All right. So what do we got here? First of all, any contact between Mars and Chiron is significant. The Mars-Chiron square will happen in one form or another about once a year. So it's not like the aspect itself is a rare aspect, but the current manifestation of this aspect is rare, which we'll get into in a second, based on other planets that are in the planetary pattern and the fact that it's the first Mars-Chiron square while Chiron is in Aries. So why this is meaningful is that inner planets such as Mars or Venus or Mercury or the Sun or the Moon bring out the qualities of Chiron in a way that other planetary influences don't. You might say rather than bring them out, they bring them in. They focus them onto the human realm. It is a little bit challenging to get outer planets to make sense in the human realm. They represent large patterns of cultural movement. They represent things in society that are enormous, like a society's tendency to go to war or the growth level of an entire society. So the outer planets can seem remote and or impersonal, but when you mix them with the energy of an inner planet, you get a tangible result, a tangible experience. And I've been really curious about the Mars Chiron square for many years, and have studied it in a significant number of clients. And what I find is that this is the square that's almost about having too much integrity. There's a lot of tension, and there's there's a perfectionism around the Mars Chiron square that's very hard to overcome. And so there are people who aspire to be, you might say, better people, but tend to not want to give themselves the room to experiment, or the room to be wrong, which you need to be to experiment, that would allow the experiment to happen, right? So if you and to allow the growth to happen. So if you want to be a better person, what that really means, I would say, is a more experienced person who learns from your experience, learns and grows from your experience. But if you don't give yourself room to have the experience, what have you got? You've got a lot of theory. You've got a lot of interesting stuff from spiritual books telling you to be a better person. All right. So, but what makes this particular pattern even more exciting is that Chiron is part of a larger aspect pattern involving a whole bunch of minor planets. They're important minor planets. They're well mapped out minor planets, but nonetheless, they're not the kind of thing that you're likely to hear about on too many other astrology websites. And one thing I'm curious is, if you hear anyone discussing this, please point me to the conversation. For example, if you've heard anyone talking about Mars square Chiron, I'm really curious what they have to say about it. I don't really get to read a lot of commentary by contemporary astrologers on Chiron, and I'm very curious what the kids are doing. All right, so currently Chiron's in a conjunction with Salacia. Salacia is a planet that I associate with sexual maturity, and I'm calling the Mars Salacia conjunction the sexual healing conjunction. We are fully aware from reading the news and reading social media that people are walking around with a lot of sexual injuries. They say they are. No one needs to, prove this fact. People claim to be experiencing tremendous pain around their sexuality. Even things you read that are supposed to be sex positive are basically laments. They're just infused with pure agony. And the problem with sexual healing in our day and age is that we don't have a context to discuss sexuality that does not involve either politics or transgression. So there's no framework where sexuality is just a normal part of life. It has to be either some kind of a sin or attack or transgression, or it has to be about politics. It has to be something waged before the Supreme Court, or a forum at the LGBT Center, or a pride parade, or a march, and we don't have a context to discuss actual sexuality. And if we're going to talk about healing, we're going to heal, if we're going to recognize what is causing us pain, there has to be a context for discussing sexuality outside of either transgression or power politics or rights, right? And this is something we need words for, and we don't really have the words for it. We don't really have a way to describe this. And the culture is not particularly friendly to people who actually want to have the conversation. And to give one example, there's a relatively new program on Sirius XM called Sex with Emily. Sex with Emily is how she says it. And I've listened to a few of these shows. Maybe you've had the honor of doing so as well. And what I'm astonished by is how often she's referring people to their doctor for hormone tests, when really what it sounds to me like, at least in my training and experience as a sex educator, is people need to just communicate more. The kinds of problems that they call up, they describe their problem, and then she's in over her head like in 30 seconds, and she says, "Oh, I think you need to go to your doctor to get your hormones checked." It's like, maybe you just need to sit with the person in a quiet space and wait till you both feel safe enough to say something. So this is pretty much where we're at, and it's not an easy place to be, and it's compounded by embarrassment. So not to make this video too much longer here, I'm supposed to keep them under 10 minutes. I'm already at 15 minutes and 2 seconds. There's another conjunction going on, which is almost like this well of family shame, the Pholus Quaoar conjunction. I've written a lot about this. I can't really say too much about it in this forum, but Quaoar goes back to the origins of human society, the concept of what it means to be human. Pholus goes back to our great-grandparents, which is most of where we get the actual idea of what it means to be human. So, you know, if you're a Sicilian Catholic like I am, your great-grandparents are, you know, whose philosophy the family lives by, and Quaoar is the story of Adam and Eve. They're both influential in a way. Which is more influential? I don't know. But there's much more nuance to these things. But one of the ways this conjunction is functioning is as a kind of a tap into the history of our families and our ancestry. And there's a lot going on there, and most of the baggage we're dragging around comes from them. It's not our own. Most of the pain you're feeling is not your own pain. You're dragging around a lot of your grandparents and parents and great-grandparents' bullshit. One of the things you do in good therapy is you learn how to give it back. One more point. In Libra, there's a point called logos. And logos to me represents the paradigm that people live in. The paradigm you live in is your reality framework. It's the concept of how you frame reality. And in Libra, that's going to be the concept of what you think a relationship is, or what you think a relationship is for. It will set your notions of the rules of the relationship, what you're supposed to do and not do in the relationship. And these paradigms are very strict and inflexible. They tend to be very strict and inflexible in our culture, partly because they're so connected to our ego identity. They're connected often to the house we live in and our supply of food. And then there's the fear of making other people jealous, which is a real fear, but it's purely based on the insecurity of the people involved. So Logos is involved in this aspect pattern. Mars is square Logos. Logos is opposite Chiron Salacia. It's a very elegant setup where this impulse and drive for sexual healing is connected to the relationship framework that we live in, which is in turn connected to the ancestral roots of our ideas, and then along comes Mars and kind of hits the whole thing like the big red cue ball bouncing around the pool table, trying to make sense of it all. And provoking action, feelings, emotion, anger, desire. I could do a whole video, probably will, on desire. What have we done to desire? Thank the Buddhists for that. All right. Planet Waves FM. Don't forget to tune in. That's planetwaves.fm. Catch this interview with juror number 4, Bob Howard. I got him on the show for 90 minutes. That is an accomplishment. Thank you for tuning in. Catch you next time.